In a world of confusion, where timelines collide and prophecy is often misunderstood, a gateway is opening, a gathering unlike any other, where the voices of the prophets echo once again. From July 8th to 11th, 2026, leaders, teachers, and seekers will converge at the Todd Hall Retreat Center for a journey through the eschatology of the prophets. This is the Gateway to Fulfillment, featuring voices you know and trust. Join Steve Magua, Tim Martin, Michael Miano, Zach Davis, Dr. Don K. Preston, and William Bell Jr., with more to be announced. For 4 unforgettable days, you'll explore the prophetic scriptures, uncover the fullness of God's redemptive plan, and gain a deeper understanding of our fulfilled hope. Seats are limited, so secure your spot now. Register today at the link in the description. Don't just watch prophecy. Step into fulfillment. If you're passionate about biblical truth, like this video, and subscribe for more powerful content and conference updates. We'll see you there.
All righty. Welcome back to another session of Ask the Pastor Bible Study with me, Steve Magua, here in St. Louis. I hope that you have been doing well since our last meeting, which was yesterday, in which we looked at Understanding the Mark of the Beast, Part 1, and I dealt with the second beast of Revelation, chapter number 13. Well, today we are going to continue with that discussion. It is a wide-ranging discussion. This is not one of those short 20-minute or 30-minute discussions. This is a wide-scale discussion about the mark of the beast. And I am hoping that we can come to some understanding of how to study the Bible in general, how to study prophecy, how to study the book of Revelation. And so I introduced some general principles yesterday. I said that in order to understand any piece of literature, any Bible book, any passage, you have to apply the proper hermeneutic. And hermeneutic is simply the way that you interpret. If you don't interpret correctly, then you are likely not going to arrive at the correct meaning of a passage or a statement. This means that you have to apply the principles of exegesis. This means that you have to pay attention to the audience relevance. You have to apply language cues and culture cues and contextual cues. You cannot ignore any of these things whenever you are studying the scriptures or any manner of literature for that matter. And so what we did yesterday was we took the book of Revelation and we said the book of Revelation was being written to 7 churches in the first century, and they are told very clearly that the things that John is prophesying about were about to take place. And so they needed to pay attention. They needed to calculate the number of the beast. And of course, being that Revelation is one of the 66 books of the Bible, particularly the Protestant Bible, then it means that the primary source for interpreting Revelation is the Bible itself, the other 65 books. And so we start off there. We know that the things are going to happen within the lifetime of the 7 churches which exist in the first century. We know that the things that are happening in Revelation 13 must conform with Matthew 24, Luke 21, Mark 13. And so we know that these things were supposed to happen in the first century by the time that the temple was destroyed in 70 AD. And so we discovered that there are 2 beasts in Revelation 13. There is the beast of Revelation 13, 1 up to 10, and then there is the beast of Revelation 13, 11 to 18. And yesterday we looked at the second beast, which is also called the false prophet in Revelation 19. Now we compared certain scriptures. We went to Paul and we saw what Paul said about the destruction of the men of lawlessness, which was to happen at the destruction of the temple. And so today I want to pick it up at Revelation 13, verse 1 up to verse 10, so that we can see the first beast, because the second beast operates under the authority of the first. The second beast of Revelation 13 operates in the presence and under the authority of the first. And you can see that right here. If we take this to verse number 12, it says, "It, the beast that comes out of the earth, exercises all the authority of the first beast in its presence." So both beasts are operating together, but one is authorizing the other. And we also said yesterday, and you can actually, if you go to my YouTube channel, you can find the playlist for this discussion, and it will show you that the second beast is the temple. The second beast is the Sanhedrin. The second beast is the religious authorities in Jerusalem, the Pharisees and the Sadducees. So let's go to the first one. So for this, we will have to begin here at verse number 1. And by the way, if you have any questions from yesterday, don't hesitate to present them. And at the end of this study, I will be answering questions that were presented yesterday in the YouTube channel. But if you're on Facebook, you need to ask a question, just go ahead and ask your question, and we should be quite all right to take care of it. Now, I want to make sure that my mic is working correctly. My audio is working correctly. If you don't mind just typing it in there, audio is good, video is good, then that way we can make sure that everything is working as it ought. So let's look at this first beast. "And I saw a beast rising out of the sea." Might make this a little bit bigger for those people who have sight issues, like sometimes I do. "I saw a beast rising out of the sea with 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 diadems on its horns and blasphemous names on its heads. And the beast that I saw was like a leopard, its feet were like a bear's, and its mouth was like a lion's mouth. And to it the dragon gave his power and his throne and great authority. One of its heads seemed to have a mortal wound, but its mortal wound was healed. And the whole earth marveled as they followed the beast. And they worshipped the dragon, for he had given his authority to the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like the beast? And who can fight against it? And the beast was given a mouth uttering haughty and blasphemous words. And it was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. It opened its mouth to utter blasphemies against God, blaspheming his name and his dwelling, that is, those who dwell in heaven. And also it was allowed to make war on the saints and to conquer them. And authority was given it over every tribe and people and language and nation. And all who dwell on earth will worship it, everyone whose name has not been written before the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who was slain. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. If anyone is to be taken captive, to captivity he goes. If anyone is to be slain with the sword must he be slain. Here is a call for the endurance and the faith of the saints. Lucy Opio, thank you for confirming that our audio is good. And I welcome everybody that is joining now. Megs, good to see you. Joseph Wawero, God bless you very much. Guys, if you can please tag somebody, you can do one of these tags. You can do either at highlight or do all of them. At highlight, at everyone, at followers, and so on and so forth. If you just put the at sign what it usually does, it will pull up names of people that you interact with, and it will invite them to the discussion. I think this discussion is a very, very worthy discussion, and I think that it is a blessing to believers who are paying attention to these things. So I am actually doing that myself. I'm tagging a couple people, and this only works on, I think it only works on Facebook with the tagging. So this is not something that is going to necessarily work on YouTube or any other one of those platforms. So we are looking at Revelation 13, the first beast. The first beast. Give me just one moment, guys, so that I can tag at least 5 or 6 people that I know appreciate this ministry, and then we will go right into it. All right, very good. The rest of you will help me to tag other people. So let's begin here at verse number 10. It says, if anyone is to be taken captive, to captivity he goes. If anyone is to be slain with the sword he must be slain. Here is a call for endurance and faith of the saints. Now, notice, dear friends, John is telling you the purpose why he's writing these things. He's writing these things in order to strengthen the saints who were about to go through these things. He's telling them there are 2 guaranteed outcomes that are going to happen, one of the other. Either you are going to be taken captive, or you're going to be slain with the sword. So therefore, he's telling the saints in the 7 churches, you need to hang in there. You need to trust God's plan. Okay? So John is not writing some abstract eschatology or theology for thousands and thousands of years, just generally how to behave. No, he's saying this is about to take place, with reference to Ephesus, with reference to Smyrna, with reference to Pergamos, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, Laodicea, and so on and so forth. These things were about to take place, and the members of these 7 churches were part of the people that were going to experience them. Remember that the 7 churches all experience the second coming of Christ at the same time. So the idea that you have had that the 7 churches represent 7 churches in history does not hold up to scrutiny. Each of the 7 churches is told, I am coming soon. Jesus does not come 7 times. The second coming does not happen 7 times. The second coming happens only once. And the 7 churches were going to be there. Whether it's Philadelphia, which is told, I know you have little strength, hold on to the little strength you have. I'm going to keep an open door for you. I'm going to keep you from the trial that is about to come upon this world. Or whether it is the Ephesus that is told, I'm about to come and take the lampstand away from you, or the lamp away from you. They were all going to experience these things together, not hundreds and thousands of years after each other. The 7 churches all exist at the same time in the 1st century. Now let's go back to verse number 1, the beast. So we are told, I saw a beast rising out of the sea. Now what is a beast? A beast is an authoritative organization. It could be a government, it could be an empire, it could be a religious authority. A beast is, this language comes out of Genesis. A beast is any group of people or any person who behaves like a wild animal. So in other words, they have little conscience. They can kill you at the drop of a hat. They are ferocious. They are wild. This is why the imagery of the beast is used. Now, beasts in the Bible, generally in prophetic scriptures, is referring to humans who are not living in relationship with God, who are operating from the flesh. So there is this beast which is rising out of the sea. It is important that immediately we establish a link here between this beast and the beast in Daniel chapter number 7, because Daniel 7 gives you this information. He says, in the first year of Belshazzar, who is a great grandson of Nebuchadnezzar, or maybe a grandson, in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions of his head as he lay in his bed. Then he wrote down the dream and told the sum of the matter. Daniel declared, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea. They were stirring up the great sea. And four great beasts came up out of the sea, different from one another. So they came out of the sea. And when they came out of the sea, where are they going? They are going to the land. Yesterday we talked about the fact that the land, the word used there is in Revelation 13, is you have the sea, and then you have the earth, which you will see here. Let me see. The whole earth. See the word earth there? The word earth there does not mean planet. Because obviously, oceans, if you were talking about literal oceans, oceans are part of the planet. So the earth here is referring to the covenant people of God, the people living in the covenant land, the promised land. So the earth always refers to old covenant Israel and its surrounding nations, the immediate nations that surround it that are part of the covenant. So you have here the beast is coming out of the sea. We are told in Daniel that this sea is the Gentile nations. And we see the first beast, which is identified by most scholars as Babylon, is like a lion. It has eagle's wings. Its wings are plucked off. It is made to stand up on 2 feet. Like a man, it is given the mind of a man. Okay, so this is Babylon. And behold, another beast coming out of the sea. A second one. It looks like a bear. It is raised up on one side. It has 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. And it was told, arise, devour much flesh. This is Persia. So the lion kingdom is Babylon. The bear is Persia. After this, I looked, and behold, another like a leopard with 4 wings of a bird on its back. In fact, let me do something here, because I want to illustrate something with my background. So just, if you can just pay attention to my background here. If you look at my background here, I have this beast of Daniel. You will see you have the lion that has the wings, you have the bear, and others are down there. And then on the other side, you have the statue of Daniel, right? So these pictures, these are things that across Christianity, there has been almost unanimous agreement that the beasts that Daniel is talking about are the empires that ruled over Israel and over Jerusalem from the time of the captivity of Israel all the way up until the time of Christ. So you have Babylon, you have Persia, you have Greece, then you have Rome. Okay, so this is generally what is accepted. So if we go back here to our text, you notice here that after the second beast, which is a bear, there is another one. It looks like a leopard. So notice these animals. So you have one like a lion is the first one, right? One is like a lion. Pay attention to that. Then the second one is like a bear. Is like a bear, the second one. The third one is like a leopard. Okay, it's had 4 wings, 4 heads. Dominion is given to it. After this, I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, terrifying, dreadful. This one, you're not told it looks like an animal. You're just told it's very terrifying, it's dreadful. It had great iron teeth. It devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it. It had 10 horns. Okay, so this is Daniel 7. Now, when you go back to Revelation 13, what do you see? You see a beast rising out of the sea. It has 10 horns, like Daniel's fourth beast. It has 7 heads, a detail that Daniel does not give you. It has 10 diadems. These are crowns, 10 crowns on its horns, and blasphemous names on its heads. And the beast that I saw was, now watch, it was like a leopard. So we are going to go reverse. What Daniel showed us, remember Daniel started with lion, bear, leopard. Lion, bear, leopard. Now this beast goes in reverse. It was like a leopard. Its feet were like a bear's, and its mouth was like a lion's mouth. Now notice this beast has what is called a composite or a composite build-up of the three, really of the 4 beasts of Daniel. So in other words, the beast, the first beast of Revelation 13 is a collage. It's a collage of the 4 beasts of Daniel. Now, why is the case? See, Daniel is prophesying 600 years before John. Daniel is prophesying 600 years before John, and he's prophesying to his contemporaries. He's telling them, this is what is happening now, and this is what will happen afterwards, all the way up to the end. So Daniel gives you all the beasts that were going to follow each other, one after the other, until the coming of Christ, until the establishment of the new heavens and new earth, eternal kingdom on earth. That's what Daniel does. John is living at the time of the end. John is living at the time of the 4th beast of Daniel. Okay? John is living at the time of the 4th beast of Daniel. So John is going to prophesy to his contemporaries, just like Daniel did, but John is going to inform you that the 4 beasts of Daniel have now merged into the last one. Why does this happen? It's important that you get this. Why is it that the 4 beasts of Daniel merge and become the first beasts of Revelation? This is how it works. God gave a kingdom to Adam. Adam was supposed to have dominion over the beasts of the sea, over the beasts of the air, over the beasts of the ground, of the earth. So if you go back to Genesis, let's do this. If we go back to Genesis chapter number 1, Genesis chapter number 1, and you look at what Adam is told, because this is all connected. So if you go back to verse number 26 here, it says, then God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea. So the fish of the sea are the beasts of the sea. The birds of the heavens are the beasts of the sky. So the eagles and stuff like that. And over the livestock of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. You go to verse 27, it says, God bless them. In fact, let's just read verse 28. It says, God bless them and say to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth, not the sea. Be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. This is the commission that Adam is given. Now, obviously, and we saw this yesterday, so I'm not going to repeat it, one of the beasts of the earth, the serpent, tricks Eve into eating the wrong tree. And by so doing, Adam and Eve lose their dominion. They lose their commission. They fail. So God goes on about to restore. God is about restoration, reconciliation, and all that. So eventually, God finds a man after his own heart, a man who is not a beast, and that man is called David. Now, David is a type of Christ. So David has dominion over the beasts of the land. Okay? And he begins a kingdom just like that of Adam. He takes over from Saul, who is a beast, but David is a man after God's own heart. He's not a beast, he's not an animal like Saul. So anyway, over time, the throne of David fails because the sons of David in progression become themselves like Adam and Eve. They lose the program, they lose the plot, and therefore it comes a time when God demotes the sons of David. And by demoting them, he sends them into captivity under the beasts of the sea. And the first beast that is given dominion over the children of men is Babylon. So if you can go back with me here to Daniel chapter 2, I want you to see what happens here. So in the time of Daniel, Babylon becomes the ruler of God's people. Notice here when you get to verse number 36 or thereabouts, when he begins to interpret, he says, this was the dream. So we are looking at the statue, the one on this side. So you, O king, here's the interpretation. You, O king, the King of Kings, to whom the God of heaven has given the kingdom. So notice the commission of Nebuchadnezzar is the same commission that Adam had been given. Watch. God has given you dominion. That's a kingdom. Power, might, and glory. And into whose hand he has given, wherever they dwell, children of men, children of Adam. So remember, Babylon is a beast of the sea. Their king is a monster. Their king is a Leviathan. Their king is a dragon. The kings of the Gentile nations are always called dragons or Leviathans. Okay? So because they come from the sea and they are very ferocious and they are very fierce and mighty and destructive. So, but God gives dominion to this dragon of the sea. Okay? So, but now this dragon is going to have dominion over the children of Adam. He is going to have dominion over the beasts of the land. He is going to have dominion over the birds of the heavens, exactly like Adam. You see that? Now, why you'll notice that Adam has dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the heavens, the creeping things or the living things on the earth. But Nebuchadnezzar, you are not told that he has dominion over the fish of the sea. Why? Because he already has that. So this is being added. Remember, he is a king from the sea. I hope this is making sense so far. By the way, boast only in the cross says, I was using Bible Hub to see how Eretz is translated into English in some passages. They translate it as earth, then as land in the same sentence. No wonder we misunderstood for centuries. Indeed. So, Nebuchadnezzar is the king of the sea. What is that guy with the what do they call it in the stories? The king of the sea, the king of Atlantis. They make movies about it, right? Anyway, with a trident. So here, he has already dominion in the sea. So now he's being added the dominion of the Adamites, the sons of Adam, the dominion of the beasts of the field, which are other humans that are not of the race of Adam, and birds of heavens are also other humans who are not from the line of Adam. He said you are to rule over them all. Now, guys, I hope you understand. Nebuchadnezzar is not being given dominion over jungle animals. Nebuchadnezzar himself is a lion of the sea. Is a sea lion, if you like. So then, so Babylon is the first kingdom of the sea after the captivity of Israel. Because remember, Israel had already gone through the dominion of creatures of the sea way back in the time of Egypt and Assyria. So there were other sea empires, there were other sea beasts that had already ruled over Israel before the time of Daniel, Egypt and Assyria. But Daniel is existing in the future of Egypt and Assyrian captivities. He's existing at the time of the Babylonian captivity. So that's why he gives you the prophecy going forward. So the kingdom of men is given over to the monsters of the sea, the Gentiles. After Nebuchadnezzar, his kingdom is given the chance to do right. They don't do right. So God demotes them and he brings another sea kingdom. Remember, these beasts are coming out of the sea. The second kingdom, which is inferior to you, shall arise after you, and yet there will be a third. So the second kingdom of the sea is Persia. King Cyrus, King Darius, Artaxerxes, so on and so forth. Then you have a third kingdom from the sea, which is the kingdom of bronze. And this is the kingdom of Greece, Macedonia, King Alexander and his father, King Philip. And of course, this third kingdom is the one of bronze, is the one that is the same as the beast, the leopard, the one that has 4 heads and 4 wings. Okay, and the reason why it has 4 heads is because after Alexander dies, the kingdom was divided into 4 different kingdoms. It is still Greece, but 4 different kingdoms. Now, but when we come to the 4th one, which Daniel is living under, John in Revelation 13 is living under, it says there shall be a 4th kingdom. There shall be a 4th kingdom. So you have Babylon being the first from the time of Daniel going forward. You have Persia being the second. You have Greece being the third. Now we are looking at the 4th. Now, who is the 4th? It's natural to assume Rome is the 4th, but please pay attention. You are told there shall be a 4th kingdom. Strong as iron, because iron breaks to pieces. There shall be a 4th kingdom. Strong as iron, because iron breaks to pieces, shatters all things. And iron, and like iron that crushes, it shall break and crush all this, shall crush all the ones before it. And as you saw the feet and the toes partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, it shall be a divided kingdom, but some of the firmness of iron shall be in it, just as you saw iron mixed with soft clay. And as the toes of the feet were partly iron and partly clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly brittle. As you saw the iron mixed with soft clay, so they will mix with one another in marriage. But they will not hold together, just as iron does not mix with clay. Now watch verse 44, very key verse. In the days of those kings, in the days of those 10 kings, remember it has 10 toes, there are 10 kings, there are 10 horns. In the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed, nor shall the kingdom that God sets up be left to another people. He shall break in pieces all these kingdoms, bring them to an end, and it shall stand forever. Now, what is the 4th kingdom? Is it Rome, as is commonly taught? Now notice, even if it were Rome, Rome is not in our present nor in our future. Rome existed in our ancient past. So Daniel was prophesying about things that were going to happen during the general time of the Roman Empire, which is the time of Jesus, which is the time of John the Revelator, which is the time of the apostles. So no matter how you cut it, The fourth beast, which is the first beast of Daniel, exists in the first century, not in the 21st century. Now, but I was coming here to show you why in Revelation, the beast has all the qualities. It has all the qualities of the first three, right? It has, it looks like a leopard, right? It has the feet of a bear and it has the mouth of a lion. Why is that? Here is the reason. You see, Israel was conquered by Babylon and taken captive. They stayed there for 70 years. In the 70 years, by the time they started coming back from the captivity, they had even forgotten their own language. If you live 70 years in a country, it is very likely you will not only forget your language, you will even lose most of your culture, and you will adapt to the culture you are living in for 70 years. So the Israelites who came back from captivity had Babylonian characteristics. They spoke the language of Babylon. They had Babylonian beliefs. Before Israel goes into captivity in Jeremiah 25 or 2nd Chronicles 36, you will not find Israelites casting out demons and believing in demons as being the cause of all trouble. They believe there is evil. They believe there are evil spirits, but that does not feature in their theology. When they come out of captivity, every wrong thing is a demon. Have you ever noticed that when you read the Old Covenant, the Old Testament, there are no demons? There's nobody casting out demons. Every disease is not a demon. Elisha does not cast out demons. Jeremiah does not cast out demons. Elijah does not cast out demons. But when you come out of the captivity, from the very first page of the book of Matthew, demons everywhere. Where did they get that from? They gathered that from the Babylonians and the Persians, because the Persians and the Babylonians believed that the world was full of demons and that every trouble was demonic. That is a Babylonian belief. That is a Persian belief. So they become very Babylonian. Then they are taken over. Babylon is defeated in the midst of the 70-year captivity. Babylon is defeated by Persia. So not only do the Israelites become Babylonian, they become Persian. They start to follow the customs of the Persians. Then at the end of the captivity, Greece comes and defeats Persia, and most Israelites remain within the empire of Greece. So that by the time you come into the New Testament, the whole New Testament is written in Greek. The disciples of Jesus spoke Greek. Greek was the normal, common language of the street in the time of Jesus. It was a language like English today. So, therefore, you need to see that by the time you come to the time of Jesus, the people of Israel look like Babylonians, they sound like Persians, they believe like the Greeks. So John is trying to help you to understand why the fourth beast will be like a lion, like a bear, like a leopard. Now, but for you to qualify to be one of the four beasts, you must have dominion over the city of Jerusalem and over the Israelites. Notice, in the time of Babylon and Persia and Greece, there are other empires on the planet Earth. There are the Aztecs in South America already exist. Even maybe they may not be called Aztecs by that time. The Chinese in the East already exist, and they are a huge empire. In Africa, there are huge empires in West Africa that exist that are very powerful. The Aborigines have their own empires in Australia by this time. In Europe, there are empires, there are authorities, but they are not included in the picture. There are only four. Why are there only four? Because these four have a direct dominion over the city of God, over the children of Adam, the Israelites. Because the Israelites are directly descended from Adam. Everyone on the planet is not descended from Adam. There were people during the time of Adam that are not in the line of Adam. So Babylon defeats Zedekiah and Jehoiakim for the control of Jerusalem. Persia defeats Babylon for the control of Jerusalem and its people. Greece defeats Persia for the control of Jerusalem and God's people. Now, therefore, the fourth kingdom has to be the one that defeats Greece for the control of Jerusalem and Jerusalem's people. Now, I need you to understand that history is quite clear, and you can look it up. Greece was not defeated by Rome for the control of Jerusalem or its people. Rome defeated Greece in Ephesus, Turkey, Asia Minor, in 146 BC. That's how Rome comes to become the mighty empire it does. It does defeat Greece. It only defeats Greece in Asia Minor. In 146 BC. Please pay attention to the dates because they become very important to the history of the Bible. So 146 BC, 146 years before Christ, Rome defeats Greece at the Battle of Ephesus. However, about 30 years, maybe 20-something years before that, Greece, under the rulership of Antiochus Epiphanes, had gone head to head with the Maccabees. The Maccabees were Jews who had come back to Israel, were under the authority of Greece under Antiochus Epiphanes, and they were living in the land. So this is about 170 BC. So remember, 146 BC is very close to the time of Jesus as opposed to 170 BC. So in 167 BC or thereabouts, Antiochus Epiphanes wants to fight his partner Greek king Ptolemy in Egypt. He goes down to Egypt in 167 BC to fight the other Greek. You remember the Greek empire is divided into four. He goes to fight the southern part of Greece, which is in Egypt. Remember, the Greeks had conquered Egypt. When he gets there with his army, he is roundly defeated. He is properly humiliated. Okay. Now, on his way home from Egypt to Greece, you have to pass through Jerusalem. So in his humiliation and anger, he goes to a city which he already has dominion over. And to pour out his anger, he goes and slaughters a pig inside the Jerusalem temple of God. And then he commands that the Jews in Israel were no longer going to be allowed to practice their worship of Yahweh and to practice their circumcision. In fact, he says from now on, everybody must worship Greek gods and practice Hellenistic or Greek culture. No more circumcision, no more animal sacrifices to the God of Israel, and then he goes home. And he leaves officials there in Jerusalem to carry out this order. Remember, this is a dominion that is his already. He is just now going to change the law. So there's a man called Judah Maccabee. His name is, well, I mean, his name was not really Maccabee, but this is what he gets to be known like later. His name is Judah, the son of Mattathias or Mattathias, however you pronounce it. So Judah, son of Mattathias, when he hears this, he lives in the countryside in Judea. When he hears this, he gathers his sons. He had a couple sons. I think he had 5 sons. And don't quote me on that one. He says to his sons, are we going to accept this? He says, I'm not going to accept it. And his sons, him and his sons, they agree they are going to fight against the Greeks. So they go down to Jerusalem. They find the Greek official who is now officiating over turning Jerusalem into a Greek city. They kill him, and they kill the priests who had accepted this, and they kill the Greek soldiers that are there, and they disappear into the hills. When news reaches Antiochus Epiphanes, the emperor of Greece that is in charge of Jerusalem, he sends an army to go and clean up those few ragtag rebels led by Judah, son of Mattathias. But that army is defeated by Judah and his sons. So, and you can read this in the book of Maccabees, by the way, the books of Maccabees, Maccabees 1, Maccabees 2. So he sends another contingent of soldiers, and Judah and his sons, by now they have started to gain a lot of support from the rest of their countrymen. There is an army forming, a guerrilla war army, terrorists kind of army. They defeat Antiochus Epiphanes, again, his army that he sends. And so this happens a couple times, and eventually, so this actually goes on for about 3.5 years, from 167 BC to 164. Around 164 BC, Antiochus decides to go down himself. He gathers a great army. He's saying, how can we be getting all these defeats from this little guerrilla warfare type ragtag army from Judea? Jerusalem is very important because Jerusalem is the link between Egypt and Asia Minor and Europe. So Jerusalem must be kept in the control of Greece. So he goes down with a huge army in order to finish the Jews. Now, somehow, Judah Maccabee and his sons defeat Antiochus Epiphanes and the Greek army that comes down. Now, because of the kind of warfare that Judah Maccabee and his sons had waged against Greece for 3 years, they came to be known as the Maccabees. The word Maccabee was a nickname. The word Maccabee means iron hammer. Iron hammer. Hammer. I know my pronunciations sometimes are not very good. So the word Maccabees, even the books of Maccabees that are apocryphal books, mean iron hammer. Why were they called the iron hammer? Because in 3 years, they kept hitting at the empire of Greece, which is the bronze, and they shattered it to pieces. So that by 164 BC, Antiochus Epiphanes was completely defeated, his army depleted. He had to go back with the tail between his feet. And by 164 BC, Rome is also rising and beginning to attack Greece from Europe, and the Parthians are also attacking Greece. So Greece just cannot divide itself up. It has to consolidate. So it gives up Jerusalem. It gives up Judea. It gives up Israel. So in 164 BC, the Israelites, having defeated the Greeks, established what is known as the Hasmonean dynasty, an independent Israelite kingdom ruled by Israelites from the tribe of Judah, and they ruled for 103 years independently. The Maccabees, also called the Hasmoneans, ruled from Jerusalem for 103 years, starting from 164 BC. When the Maccabees defeated Antiochus Epiphanes in warfare, in military conquest, and established their kingdom in Jerusalem, the Romans, who themselves were rising, they were still a republic, they sent a letter to the people of Jerusalem, and that letter is still in record even today. So you can research it, you can find it. And they sent the letter, they said, we recognize that you have defeated the Greeks for your own territory, and we congratulate you, and we want to enter into an alliance with you, because Rome is rising, and the way kingdoms rise is by making alliances with others so that you can concentrate on knocking off the big dog. So Rome was making many alliances. They made an alliance with Jerusalem, and for the 100 years that Israel ruled itself independently, they were allies. They were not paying tribute to Rome. They were allies. They were partners against all the kingdoms that were around them. Now watch again what Daniel tells you. Now, with that in mind, with what I just shared with you, it says, let's begin here at let's begin here at verse 36. It says, the dream, we will interpret it. You, O king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, you are the king of kings. God has given you the dominion and the power, the might, and the glory, and he has given into your hand the children of men, that's Israel, the beasts of the field, that's the nations around Israel, the birds of the heavens, these are a little bit further, but they're transitional nations, and of course you rule the sea already. You are to rule over them all. Another kingdom inferior to you, which is Persia, will rise, and yet a third, which is Greece, will rise. There shall be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron. The word Maccabee, that's what the word Maccabee actually means, strong as iron, because iron breaks to pieces and shatters all things, and like iron that crushes, it shall break and crush all this. Why does it crush all this? Do the Maccabees crush the Babylonians and the Persians? Well, if you understand the history of empires, the Babylonian Empire became the Persian Empire. Okay? The Babylonian Empire did not remain. The Persians took over the territory of the Babylonians. The Persian Empire, when it was defeated by the Greeks, became the Greek Empire. So therefore, when you defeat Greece, you are defeating Babylon and Persia too, because they are included within the kingdom. So the Maccabees defeat all these. And as you saw, the feet, so this is the latter end of the kingdom, the feet and the toes. Because remember, this kingdom begins at the thighs. They are partly of clay and partly of iron. It shall be a divided kingdom, but some of the firmness of iron will be in it. So the iron here represents the Jews, the Judeans, the sons of Maccabee, and the iron, the clay represents the Herodians. Because you see, remember I told you that they ruled themselves for 103 years, right? From 164 BC. If you calculate that, if you take 100 years from 164 BC, it brings you to about 64 BC. Okay. Now, around 64 BC, at the end of the independent stage of the Israelite kingdom, there was a queen. Her name was Salome, and the queen had two sons, Hyrcanus and Aristobulus. And these two sons both wanted to become king, and they both had a claim on the throne because Salome had not made a good succession. So they went into a civil war. So Israel, in about 63 BC, went into a civil war. Aristobulus fighting against Hyrcanus. And so, since they were allies to Rome, they wrote a letter to Rome and said, listen, we are having problems here. You are our biggest ally. You are now a world empire. You are big brother. Come help us resolve our problems. So the Senate of Rome sent General Pompey, like the mountain, Pompeii, Mount Vesuvius that rained its lava on the city of Pompeii. Pompeii is named after this general. So anyway, Pompey comes, at least I think so. I could be wrong. But anyway, Pompey comes to Jerusalem in 63 BC with his army. Now, the Romans are busy conquering other nations, but Israel is their ally. So they are not conquering Israel. They are not fighting Israel. Israel is not fighting them. But the Romans, they are bent on ruling the world. So when they are invited to come and help the Israelites resolve their internal political issues, immediately General Pompey of Rome recognizes an opportunity to bring Israel under subjugation. So he comes with his whole army. Remember, he's a general. And he comes outside Jerusalem. And then he sends a message to both the brothers that are fighting, Aristobulus and Hyrcanus. He says, listen, I am here to help you, but if I'm going to help you, you guys have to give me authority to come into your city with my military forces in order to keep the peace. I am here as a peacekeeper. I'm here as United Nations. So the whole United Nations thing didn't just start the other day in 1917, League of Nations. No, this has always been the strategy of conquering nations. So the Israelites, because they are so embroiled in their own civil warfare, they don't realize and recognize they are about to give up their sovereignty. So they say, sure. So General Pompey comes into Jerusalem in full military colors, and he takes over. And he sits as the judge between the two warring brothers, who is going to be the king. And General Pompey goes on ahead and does what people do in politics. He meets secretly with each of the brothers, and he tells them, whichever one of you bribes me the most, you become king. And so now the two brothers began to compete on how to bribe General Pompey. And the bribes, of course, were not personal. The bribes were national and international. In other words, whoever gives the most control over to Rome becomes king. And of course, at the end of the day, that's what happened. One of the brothers, and I can't remember right now whether it's Aristobulus or Hyrcanus, one of the brothers cedes the most authority to Rome. And that's how Rome becomes a semi-ruler over Jerusalem. But Rome is very wise. They want to do a divide and rule kind of thing. So what they do is that they tell the Israelites, you will retain the throne, the kingship. You'll still be kings over Jerusalem, but you have to pay a tribute to Rome, and you'll have to allow us to have our own rulers inside Jerusalem and our army to protect you. And so the Israelites agree. So from 63 BC, Rome is now the semi-colonial power over Israel. But at that time, they are not doing it forcefully. Right? At that time, it's an ally kind of agreement. Now, in the course of time, around 40 BC, there were other people in the region, Idumeans, and there was a particular gentleman who is called Herod the Great. And Herod the Great has designs on becoming a ruler himself. He's an Idumean, he's not an Israelite. So, and once he realizes that the Israelites have become very, very weak, he approaches the Romans. He says, listen, I'm a better ruler than these guys. I live in the region. I am, of the family. I'm from Esau, and so on and so forth. And he makes a deal with the Romans. He said, I'm going to give you more money. I'm going to tax them. I don't care for them. So the Romans give military support to Herod. And Herod attacks Jerusalem. And he conquers it. But Herod wants to rule the Israelites. Herod wants to continue the arrangement between him and Rome, between Rome and Jerusalem. So Herod takes one of the daughters of the line of Queen Salome and he marries her. And by so doing, Herod consolidates the throne in Jerusalem, so that now the throne in Jerusalem is being ruled by a mixture of Israel and Esau. Israel and Edom, the Edomians. Herod was an Edomian, and he was a descendant of Esau. Now watch this. What does the scripture say? It says, and as you saw the feet and the toes, so this is the tail end, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, it shall be a divided kingdom. But some of the firmness of the iron shall be in it. And just as you saw iron mixed with soft clay, remember that Esau had red hair and red skin like clay. And as the toes were partly iron and partly clay, so the kingdom, remember we are talking about a kingdom, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly brittle. How? As you saw the iron mixed with the soft clay, so they will mix with one another in marriage. So Nebuchadnezzar is given such a dream that is so very specific that in fact in later years the Jews used to debate whether the book of Daniel was really prophecy because it was too specific in its prophetic pronouncements. It looked as if somebody was writing the prophecy after the fact, as like a news item, because I mean very, very detailed issues. Like if you go to Daniel 11, the queen of the south will do this, the king of the north will do this. All those things are recorded in the book of Maccabees, the wars between the Seleucids and the Ptolemies. So anyway, this kingdom is the kingdom of Herod in Jerusalem, which is a mixture of the Israelites from the Maccabean line, the Hasmonean line, Asmoneus, and the Herodian line. So that by the time you come to Jesus, Herod the Great dies around 6 to 4 BC, thereabouts, maybe 4 BC at the latest. His son, Herod, takes over, but by this time, the Romans divide up Israel into what are called tetrarchies. And they have the sons of Herod the Great ruling different parts. So you have Philip ruling one part. There is the Herod who rules in Jerusalem. There is a Herod who rules in the south, Abilene, and so on and so forth. So anyway, so what is happening here? You are told in the days of those kings. Which kings? The kings that live at the tail end, at the feet, at the toes. So you are talking about the last 10 kings of the Herodian Maccabean dynasty that is operating during the time of Rome. So when people say that the fourth kingdom is Rome, there is a tinge of truth to it, but it is not a scriptural truth, because Rome does rule the world and it does have authority over Jerusalem at the time of the fourth kingdom, but the fourth kingdom itself is not Rome. The fourth kingdom is the one that defeated Greece. The fourth kingdom is the one that has a king in Jerusalem. Because remember, at the time of the Babylonian captivity, there was no king in Jerusalem, or at least when they took over completely. Because the first time that Nebuchadnezzar comes, he installs Zedekiah as his client king. But when the Israelites, the people of Judah, will not really follow the rules, then he does away with them, right? So the next time we see a king in Jerusalem is the time of Jonathan, the son of Judah Maccabee, in 163 BC. Okay, so now look at verse 44. It's on the screen. In the days of those kings, the kings of the fourth kingdom, God will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed. So this is talking about the kingdom of Christ, right? So the fifth kingdom is the kingdom of Christ. So when did the kingdom of Christ get set up? Because if the fourth kingdom is Rome, and if the fourth kingdom is Israel, as I am saying, and I believe that I am more correct than those who say Rome is, and I'm not the only one who says that, then it means that the events of the beast of Revelation are happening at the time of the fourth kingdom. So that when you're talking about the mark of the beast happens at the time of the fourth kingdom. Because after the fourth kingdom comes the fifth kingdom, which is the kingdom of Christ. Now let's see when the kingdom of Christ is set up. When is the kingdom of Christ set up? Now, I'm going to first of all start from the Old Testament so that you can see the progression, so that you can see that the kingdom of Christ has the same elements as the kingdom of Adam, as the kingdom of Nebuchadnezzar. So first and foremost, go with me to Jeremiah. Jeremiah chapter 31. Jeremiah chapter 31. Okay, so Jeremiah chapter 31, obviously verse 31 is where we get the new covenant, right? Everybody knows this. I mean, most of you know it anyway. If you don't know it, then you know it today. The new covenant. Behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. Does everyone agree that this is what Jesus did at the cross? Does everyone agree that the new covenant is what Jesus established at the cross? You have to. Because Jesus in Matthew 26 says, take this cup represents my blood of the new covenant. So Jesus establishes the new covenant at the cross, right? Now watch. If you go back to verse 27, it says, behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will sow the house of Israel and the house of Judah with the seed of men, that's the seed of Adam, and the seed of beast. Beasts are Gentiles. Jesus, in dying on the cross, establishes a kingdom in which Gentiles and Israelites are joined into one kingdom. This is what the New Testament teaches. Ephesians chapter 2, Colossians chapter 3, all of this, right? So the seed of men and the seed of beasts, it shall come to pass as I have watched over them to pluck them up, break them down, overthrow them, destroy them, bring them harm, so I will watch over them to build and to plant. And then now he goes into the new covenant is with Israel and so on and so forth. So therefore, we know that the new covenant is the fifth kingdom. The new covenant kingdom is the fifth kingdom. What I'm trying to establish here is that we are told here in verse 44 that in the days of the 10 kings, in the days of the 10 kings of the fourth kingdom, the last 10 kings, that is, God will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed. I'm trying to show you that this happened in the lifetime of Jesus. Now the next one I want to show you is Hosea. Hosea, where art thou, Hosea? There thou art. Hosea chapter 2. So again, I want just to show you that the kingdom of Christ, which was established 2,000 years ago, is the fifth kingdom. We are not living at a time when the kingdom of Christ is in our future. We are living at a time when the kingdom of Christ already came in our past and has been in our past and is in our present and will be in our future forever and ever. Hosea chapter 2, verse number 18. Hosea 2, verse number 18. Let's start at verse number 16. And in that day declares the Lord, you will call me my husband, bridegroom, and you will no longer call me my Baal, my master, my slave master. For I will remove the names of the Baals from her mouth, and they shall be remembered by name no more. Remember where he says, the former things shall not be remembered. And I will make for them, Israel, he's talking about Israel, I will make for them on that day, the day of the cross, I will make for them on that day a covenant with the beasts of the field, the birds of the heavens, and the creeping things of the ground. You see that? Jesus, on the night he died, was making a covenant for Israel with the beasts of the field, the birds of the heavens, and the creeping things on the ground. Now, is there any of you that think Jesus was making a covenant on the cross with lions and cobras and rhinoceros and waterbucks or eagles? Are they included in the new covenant? Of course not. The new covenant is between Christ and Israel and Gentiles. You asked the question, so is the 10 kings of the Maccabean kingdom? Well, if you are following, by 63 BC, the Maccabean kingdom disintegrates, and it comes under the rulership of the Romans. And then in 40 BC, the Herodians enter into the picture, and the Herodians take over and they intermarry with the Maccabeans. So are the Maccabeans extant in the time of Jesus? In the family of Herod, yes, right? But they are no longer the face. The Herodians are the face of the kingdom, but it's a mixture. There is iron in it because they have married into that family. So I hope you get the idea. By the way, this is why the zealots, if you know, the zealots, the Sicarii, right? What are they trying to do in the first century? In 6 AD, when they rebel, when there was a Jesus, there was a Yeshua who led the zealots into a rebellion in 6 AD against the Herodians, and they were slaughtered by the Romans. What happened there? You remember Gamaliel tells this story? Remember this Jesus who rose up and then they were all destroyed? What are they trying to do? The zealots are trying to restore the Maccabean kingdom. That's the whole idea of the zealots. That's why in 66 AD, when they take over Jerusalem, the zealots, they now say, woohoo, finally, the head that had been dealt a mortal wound has resurrected. The head that had been dealt a mortal wound has been resurrected. So look at this. It says here, one of its heads seemed to have a mortal wound, but its mortal wound was healed, and the whole earth, the whole land, marveled as they followed the beast. And they worshipped the dragon, for it had given its authority to the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, who is like the beast? Who can fight against it? So the zealots feel in 66 AD, we are in the spirit of Judah Maccabee. We are about to bust this thing wide open, and we are going to establish an eternal kingdom once and for all. Okay. So now, in Hosea, the covenant of Christ is with the beasts of the field, the birds of the heavens, the creeping things of the ground. Then finally, well, not quite finally, Matthew. So we're going to look at two passages in Matthew that tell you who the fourth kingdom was. Number one, Matthew chapter number 21. Who does Jesus say the fourth kingdom is? Because remember, Jesus' kingdom, the eternal kingdom, comes to take over from the fourth kingdom. Does that make sense? So according to Daniel chapter number 2, right, in the days of the kings of the fourth kingdom, God will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed, nor shall the kingdom of God be left to another people. It shall break in pieces all these kingdoms that are before it. So it will break forth, it will break apart the fourth kingdom, the third kingdom, the second kingdom, or the first kingdom. Nor shall it be left to another people. It shall break in pieces all these kingdoms, bring them to an end, and it stands forever. So do you see that the kingdom of God that is set up in verse 44 takes place during the fourth kingdom, destroys the fourth kingdom together with the kingdoms before it. And now you understand how that happens, because it has morphed. It has gained all the characteristics of the former kingdoms. So when you destroy the last one, it's like you're destroying all that has been set up from before. But it is at the time of the fourth kingdom that the kingdom of God is set up. The fifth kingdom takes over from the fourth kingdom. The fifth kingdom is God's kingdom. The fourth kingdom is a kingdom from the sea. The fourth kingdom is a kingdom from the sea. Because the Maccabees are coming out of the Grecian kingdom. Because at the time of the Maccabees in 167 BC, Israel is part of the Greek Empire. They are not an independent nation. You have to understand why in Revelation 13 you are told, I saw a beast coming out of the sea, verse 1. So how is it that Israelites who form an independent kingdom in Jerusalem, who live in Jerusalem, how come they are being seen as coming out of the sea? Because at the time that the Maccabees defeat the Greeks, Jerusalem is part of Greece. Jerusalem is part of the sea. The waters of the sea have flooded all the way to Jerusalem. So when the Maccabees defeat the Greeks, it is just as it is said by Peter in 2 Peter, that the land rose up out of the water. Have you ever seen that verse in 2 Peter chapter 3? The earth was created, it stood up out of water. Let me show you the verse that I'm referring to here. And hopefully I will have the correct 2 Peter chapter 3. So notice how Peter is going to describe the creation of the earth. So you will say, let's pick it up for verse 5. For they deliberately overlooked this fact that the heavens existed long ago, and the earth was formed out of water and through water by the word of God. I think it's the King James or the New King James that puts it like this. Let's go to the King James just for a second. It's very interesting wording that the Greek does. Look at this. For, I'm reading verse 5. For this they willingly are ignorant of that by the word of God the heavens were of old, and the earth, the land, standing out of water and in the water. So this is what is happening in the time of Maccabees. The waters have flooded the whole region. The waters are Gentiles. But Israel, by the decree of God, stands up out of the water. Okay, they stand up out of the water. And they form a covenant dwelling place for God. They restore the worship of God and so on and so forth. So now, Matthew 21. I was going to show you that the fifth kingdom of Christ happens at the time of Jesus and the apostles. I want to show you who had the fourth kingdom. Now remember that this is something that is because I've already given you this history of the Maccabees. The Pharisees and Sadducees, which we saw yesterday, formed the second beast. The Pharisees and Sadducees were formed after the nation became independent in 164 BC. So there were no Pharisees or Sadducees in Old Covenant Israel. This is a new thing that was formed once Jonathan Maccabee became the king of Israel. Then there were formed two groups of people. The Asmoneans themselves, the family of Judah Maccabee, were Sadducees. They believed themselves to be the descendants of Zadok, the priest. That's why they're called Sadducees, Mazadukayo. Okay? But the Pharisees were teachers, they were rabbis who felt that they needed to regulate the Torah, the law. So you have these four groups forming in the independent kingdom of Israel in 160. I mean, you are probably coming into the 150s BC and 140s and so on and so forth. Why is that important? Because these two groups become the warring factions that try to control the throne of Jerusalem. And in fact, for the first 100 years, they are able to control it until they have the civil war and they invite the Romans, and then eventually Herod comes and takes over. Now, in Matthew 21, Jesus tells you who the kingdom is, the fourth kingdom. Is it America? Is it Russia? Is it the Muslims? Jesus tells you. So in verse number 33, Jesus tells a parable. He says there's a parable here. There was a master of a house who planted a vineyard, like the Garden of Eden. Planted a vineyard like the Garden of Eden. See the language? And he put a fence around it, just like the Garden of Eden. It had a gate. He dug a wine press in it, and he built a tower, and he leased it to tenants. Adam was a tenant in Eden. Israel was a tenant in Israel. So this is the story of Israel. When the season for fruit drew near, he sent his servants to get his fruit. The tenants took his servants, beat one, killed another, stoned another. Again, he sent other servants more than the first, and they did the same to them. Finally, he sent his son to them. So this is clearly about Jesus, because his son here is Jesus. But when the tenants saw the son, they say to themselves, "This is the heir. Come, let us kill him, and we will be able to obtain his inheritance." Remember, the kingdom had been given to Adam in Genesis 1 is the kingdom that will be given to Christ in Matthew 28, as we shall see shortly. This is what the Pharisees and the Sadducees wanted to take by force. The kingdom suffereth violence, the violent want to take it by force. This is the heir, come let us kill him, have his inheritance. They took him, they threw him out of the vineyard, Jerusalem. They killed him at Golgotha, which is outside Jerusalem. When therefore the owner of the vineyard comes, I hope everybody can see that verse number 40 is the second coming, the time of judgment. When the owner of the vineyard comes, what will he do to those tenants who killed his son, who threw him out of the vineyard, who tried to take the kingdom by force? They say to him, the Jews replied to Jesus in his parable, he will put those wretches to a miserable death. The final judgment is not the judgment of the planet. It is the judgment of the apostates of the old covenant. He will put those particular wretches to death, and he will let out, he will have new tenants. He will let out the vineyards to other tenants who will give him the fruits in the season. So notice, the world does not end at the second coming. Rather, a new set of tenants is established in God's garden, God's vineyard. And this one is open-ended. I'm saying we are part of the other tenants, and we will never leave the garden. Jesus said to them, have you never read the scriptures? The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. This was the Lord's doing, and it is marvelous in our eyes. Have you never read that? Therefore, I tell you, this part is extremely critical and profound. I learned this from Adam Mashok. The kingdom of God will be taken away from you and given to a people producing its fruit. Now, if you have been following the story so far, the four kingdoms in Daniel 2 and Daniel 7 are kingdoms that had received dominion from God, just like Adam. And the four in Daniel 2 and Daniel 7 are the last four: Babylon, Persia, Greece, the Hasmonean Maccabean kingdom, which by the time of Jesus is a mixture of the Herodians and the Maccabees. But the authority comes from the chief priest, comes from the law, because the ability to become king in Israel was governed by the law. That's why when Jesus was being born, the wise men come to Herod because they are assuming it's Herod's son that has been born, the promised one. They come to Herod and say, "We have come to worship the king." Herod knows he doesn't have the authority, so what does he do? Herod calls the priests, the elders of Israel, the purveyors of the law, say, "Hey guys, you got to guide me here. What does the law say? Who has the authority to become king?" Because Herod, why did he need the priests? Why did he need the elders of Israel? Because he was not the authorized king. The kingship flows from the temple. From the temple. Now, therefore I tell you, the kingdom of God will be taken away from you, given to a people. So the kingdom had been given to Babylon, it was passed on to Persia, it was passed on to Greece, it was passed back to Israel. Israel had become divided and the kingdom had been taken over by the Herodians. Okay? But the Herodians are under the authority of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Now watch. So Jesus says the kingdom will be taken away from you, people. It will be given to another people, the fifth kingdom. And the one who falls on this stone will be broken to pieces, and when it falls on anyone, it will be crush him. When the chief priests and the Pharisees, remember, chief priests are Sadducees. The Pharisees are the rulers of the synagogues. When the chief priests and the Pharisees heard his parables, they perceived, they comprehended he was speaking about them. So question, who was in possession of the kingdom of God, which has been passing hands since the time of Nebuchadnezzar? Once it passed from Zedekiah. Who is in charge of the kingdom? Who is possessing the kingdom? Well, it can only be taken away from them if they are possessing it. It can only be taken away from them if they are possessing it. The chief priests, they possess it. They possess the kingdom. They possess the kingdom. Therefore, it will be taken away from them because they possess it. So the fourth kingdom, Jesus tells you, is Israelite. The fourth kingdom is under the authority of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Jesus tells you. Jesus comes under the judgment of the high priest, the Pharisees and the Sadducees in Matthew 26. Okay, Matthew 26, verse number 57, 58. Look at what happens. Because something is about to dramatically shift. Remember in Daniel, there is a stone that is cut without hands that comes and smashes the fourth kingdom at the toes, at the ankles, and breaks it, right? We know that the stone is Jesus. And we know that the activity of smashing the statue at the bottom takes place at the second coming. Okay, now watch this. So we are going to go here into the trial of Jesus. So now the chief priests, verse 59, and the whole council, which is made up of Pharisees and Sadducees, were seeking false testimony against Jesus. Remember, Jesus says, whoever falls upon this stone will be smashed to pieces. Whomever the stone falls upon. Did you see that in Matthew 21? I hope you guys saw it. Did you guys see it? I mean, just make sure that you saw it. The stone of Daniel is in Matthew 21. I know we're talking about the mark of the beast, but if you cannot identify the beast correctly, then how can you identify the mark of the beast correctly? So notice here in verse 44, 42 to 44. First of all, it tells you about the stone. Have you never read the scriptures? The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. This was the Lord's doing. It is marvelous in our eyes. Therefore, I tell you, the kingdom will be taken away from you and given to a people producing its fruit. And the one who falls on this stone will be broken to pieces. If it falls on anyone, it will crush him to powder. Look at what Daniel says about the stone. He says, first of all, let's go back here to verse 35. He says, then, no, actually, we have to begin here. As you looked, a stone was cut out by no human hand. This is the incarnation. Jesus is not a regular human being. Because Peter is a rock, Peter is a pebble, but Peter is cut by human hand. Peter is born of both human parents. But Jesus is said to be a stone cut out by no human hand because of the incarnation. And this stone struck the image on its feet, not at its thighs, not at its knees, on its feet of iron and clay, and broke them in pieces. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, the gold, all together were broken in pieces. Jesus says in Matthew, whoever falls on this stone will be broken to pieces. If it falls on anyone, it will crush him. Now look at what Daniel says. And the wind, so it became like the chaff of the summer wind. So this is powder. And the wind carried them away, so that no trace could be found of them. But the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. So usually people think that the stone is crushing the statue at the second coming. I beg to differ. The stone is not crushing the statue at the second coming. The stone is crushing the statue at the first coming of Christ. And I will prove it to you in a moment. Now watch this. So in Matthew 26, Jesus is brought before the chief priests. They are seeking false testimony against him so that they might put him to death. But they found none, though many false witnesses came forward. At last two came forward and said, this man said, I'm able to destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days. And the high priest stood up and said, have you no answer to make? What is it that this men testify against you? But Jesus remained silent. The high priest said to him, I adjure you by the living God, tell us if you are the Christ, the King, the coming King. Are you the coming King? The one we've been looking for? Jesus said to him, you have said so. I am the coming King. But I tell you, from now on, now watch, when? From now on, the striking begins. From now on, I tell you, you will see the Son of Man seated on the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven. From when? Not 40 years from now. From this moment onwards. The chief priest tore his robes. He has uttered blasphemy. What is your judgment? He deserves death. So Jesus gets killed in chapter 27. So what happens when Jesus rises from the dead? The stone that the builders have rejected becomes a living stone. Now watch what the living stone, the resurrected stone, says to his disciples in verse 18. And Jesus came to them. This is after the resurrection, right? So now the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain which Jesus had directed them. When they saw him, they worshipped him, and some doubted. Jesus came and said to them, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I've commanded you. And behold, I'm with you always until the end of the age. So what I'm saying here is this, that in Daniel 2, the stone struck the image at its feet, right? Completely destroyed it. Then the stone became a great mountain. So do you see the process? The stone first strikes, then it becomes a great mountain. The 40 years between 30 AD and 70 AD was the time for the stone to become a great mountain. Therefore, the stone had already struck the image. Jesus has already told us in Matthew 21 that the Pharisees, the Sadducees, are the stewards of the kingdom, the fourth kingdom. So he strikes them at the cross. Look at what Colossians will tell you about this. Run with me to Colossians real quick about this kingdom and the striking. Colossians chapter number 2. Colossians chapter number 2. And for this purpose, please allow me to use the NIV because I think it just has the proper language to give you the understanding. We want verse number what? So look at this. When you are dead in your sins and in the circumcision of your flesh, God made you alive with Christ. He forgave us all our sins, having cancelled the charge of our legal indebtedness, which stood against us. I think somebody said it's not indebtedness, it's indebtedness. I don't know why it has a B there. Anyway, he has taken it away, nailing it to the cross, and having disarmed the powers and the authorities, he made a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them by the cross. Do you see that? Having disarmed the powers and the principalities, the ones that had the kingdom, he made a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them by the cross. So the cross was the moment at which the stone struck the image, breaking it. In fact, Paul says this: if the rulers had known, 1 Corinthians chapter number 2, verse number 8. Look at what Paul says about the cross and why it was so profound. 1 Corinthians chapter number 2, verse number 8. He says, none of the rulers of this age, none of the kings of this age understood it. For if they had, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. If the rulers of this age had understood what was happening, they would not have given up their kingdom so easily. They would have allowed Christ to live a normal life and die of old age, which of course was never going to happen, because Christ was going to keep poking them until they retaliated, thereby destroying themselves. So none of the rulers, none of the kings of this age understood it. He's not talking about Herod, although Herod was part of the system. He's particularly talking about the temple system. So the kingdom is Israel. It is being administrated by the chief priests and the Herodian Maccabean dimension. But Jesus defeats it all at the cross. He becomes king at the cross. So that now when the apostles go forward, they go to preach the kingdom. They say the kingdom has already come. The kingdom is already established. Now we are waiting for the king to come back and sit on his throne. But he is already king. He has gone to war. When he comes, he's coming for the victory lap. And that is what happened in 70 AD. So therefore, when thinking about this mark of the beast in Revelation 13, you need to understand that this is the Maccabean Herodian axis that is the beast coming out of the sea. It does have a political and a religious aspect to it, but that's what is happening. It has 10 horns, 7 heads. It has 10 diadems. It has blasphemous names on its heads. It looks like the 3 that were before it. And to it the dragon gave his power and his throne. Now remember, Revelation 13 is taking place. Now I've given you a long history of the Maccabees and all that. But Revelation 13 is taking place in the last 42 months of Jerusalem as God's covenant city. It's important that you understand that. So when John is describing Revelation 13 the first BC, he's not describing it as it was in 167 BC. He's not even describing it as it was in Jesus' day. He's describing it as it is at the time he's writing. So he says, I saw a beast coming out of the sea. So that's past. But now the beast that I saw is like this. And then he says the dragon, which is the high priest, has already given it its authority. The head has already come back to life. Then now he says, look at verse number 5. And the beast was given a mouth uttering haughty and blasphemous words, and it was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. These 42 months are the final 42 months. How do we know these are the final 42 months? Because Revelation 11 tells us the first mention of the beast in the book of Revelation is in Revelation 11. The first mention of the beast is in Revelation 11. You don't start studying the beast at Revelation 13. You start at 11. Because 11 sets the tone. Watch. Then I saw, then I was given a measuring rod like a staff, and I was told, rise, measure the temple of God, and the altar, and those who worship there. But do not measure the court outside the temple. Leave that out. For it is given over to the nations. They will trample the holy city, Jerusalem, for 42 months. And I will grant authority to my 2 witnesses, and they will prophesy for 1260 days. 1260 days and 42 months are the same exact things, 3.5 years. These 2 witnesses are the 2 olive trees, and they are also the 2 lampstands. Symbolism, right? That stand before the Lord of the earth. All the way back from Zechariah. Is it Zechariah 4? And if anyone would harm them, might be Zechariah 3, but I think it's 4. If anyone would harm them, fire pours from their mouth and consumes their foes. If anyone would harm them, can somebody dare to harm these 2 witnesses? Well, let's see. If anyone would harm them, this is how he is doomed to be killed. They have the power to shut the sky like Moses, or like Elijah rather, that no rain may fall in the days of their prophesying like Elijah. They have the power to turn waters into blood like Moses, and to strike the earth with every kind of plague like Moses and the Old Testament prophets. So these 2 witnesses are Old Testament people. They are not Moses, and they are not Enoch, and they are not Elijah. They are Old Testament people living in the final section of the Old Covenant. So this is at the time of the apostles. These are the people executing the law and the prophets. So these are generally, number 1, the witnesses of Christ in the first century. Generally. Secondly, they are the believers of Christ who are both Jews and Gentiles, making 2 witnesses to 2 peoples. Thirdly, they are Peter and Paul. Of course, Peter being the apostle to the Jews, Paul being the apostle to the Gentiles. So those are all the levels that these people are. They are disciples of Christ living in the first century. They are the ones that were commanded by Christ to keep the law in Matthew 5:18. And they are specifically the apostles to the Jews and to the Gentiles. These are the witnesses. And that's why Jesus tells the disciples, wait in Jerusalem. When you receive power, you will become my witnesses. So this is talking about is symbolism representing the church in the first century at the time of the second coming. So anyway, when they have finished their testimony, Remember, Jesus sends them to go and testify. Now, this part, when they have finished their testimony, let me show you something about it. Go back with me to Matthew 24. When do they finish their testimony? Matthew 24, verse 14. And this gospel of the kingdom, which comes at the cross, will be proclaimed throughout the whole world, the oikumene, the Roman Empire, as a testimony to all nations. Then the end will come. The end of what? The end of the old covenant kingdom that had been given to Adam. Jesus came to bring it to an end. So the apostles are sent to the Roman Empire, which is the world at that time, in order to proclaim the kingdom is about to be brought to an end and another one has already started. You need to escape from the one disintegrating and run into the one that is going to remain. This is the message of the kingdom. One kingdom was going to be utterly destroyed. One kingdom was going to remain forever. Daniel 2. In the days of the fourth kingdom, God will set up a kingdom besides the one that existed, and then he would transfer the kingdom powers to the new people, and they would remain forever. So these are the witnesses. So the kingdom, the testimony is at the end of the age. 70 AD was 66 AD really. So here we see in Revelation, it says, and when they have finished their testimony, so this is 66 AD, now their testimony is done. Now the time of the judgment begins for 3.5 years. The beast that rises from the bottomless pit will make war on them and kill them. And their dead bodies will lie in the street of the great city that symbolically is called Sodom and Egypt, where their Lord was crucified. For 3.5 days, some of the peoples of the tribes and languages and nations will gaze at their dead bodies and refuse to let them be placed in a tomb. So this is symbolism, guys. So don't take this literally. But notice we are here because of the beast. So the beast kills them. The beast kills Peter and Paul. The beast kills Jews and Gentiles who believe in Christ. And the beast is the temple, is the Jewish authorities. It's not Rome. It's not Rome. So this beast rises from the bottomless pit, from the sea. The bottomless pit is the sea. These are the zealots, the Israelite zealots. So it makes war on the saints. It conquers them and kills them. This issue of making war on them is seen right after the crucifixion of Christ here in Revelation 12, where it says, from verse 10, and I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, now the salvation and power and kingdom of our God and the authority of Christ have come. That's the resurrection of Christ, Matthew 28. For the accuser of our brothers has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before God. And they conquered him, the accuser. They conquered the accuser by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. Again, this is the apostles. For they loved not their lives even to death. Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to you, earth and sea, for the devil has come down to you in great wrath, because he knows his time is short. When the dragon saw that he had been thrown down to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the child. But the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle, so that she might fly from the serpent into the wilderness to the place where she is to be nourished for a time, times and half a time, 3.5 times, 3.5 years, 1260 days. The serpent poured water like a river out of his mouth after the woman to sweep her away with a flood, but the earth came to the aid of the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed the river of the. I'm not explaining all these verses because I'm trying to just stay within the beast. So this is happening right after the crucifixion of Christ. This is a persecution of the church that you're being given in the book of Acts chapter 8, chapter 9, and going forward. So then the dragon became furious with the woman and went off to make war on the rest of our offspring. The rest of our offspring are the 2 witnesses. The 2 witnesses are not 2 individual people. The 2 witnesses is the corporate body of Christ, Jews and Gentiles in the first century. on those who keep the commandments of God and hold to his testimony. And he, the dragon, stood on the sand of the sea. So now we are about to get into the final conflict at the end of chapter 12, so that by the time you get to chapter 13, now you are going to be given the final activity of the beast before it is destroyed. Because here in chapter 13, you have finished the 7 trumpets and the 7 seals. You are about in chapter 15 to get into the 7 bowls of wrath. So in other words, the 7 bowls of wrath represent the 5 months of the siege of Jerusalem. The beast is operating in that period before the final 5 months, because the beast will be destroyed in those final 5 months. So the beast is ruling in Jerusalem. Look at this. It's given authority, verse 5. It was given authority for 42 months. It opened its mouth to utter blasphemies against God, blaspheming his name and his dwelling, that is those who dwell in heaven. Also, it was allowed to make war on the saints. Do you see that the war on the saints here in chapter 13 is the same war on the 2 witnesses? The 2 witnesses are not 2 individual people. The 2 witnesses is the corporate body made of Jews and Gentiles, the 2 that God was making into one. And it was given authority over every tribe. Again, here, every tribe, every nation, every language is talking about those within the covenant jurisdiction, which is the Roman Empire. And all who dwell on the land will worship it. That is hyperbole. It doesn't mean that everyone that lived in Israel or within the covenant of Israel worshipped it. It's hyperbole. Obviously, the apostles were also living in the land, but they did not worship it. It's just hyperbole. It's just like when you say, everybody came to my party. I mean, do you mean like everybody, like every human, even every person in your city? No, it's just hyperbole, just exaggeration. I just want to communicate a lot of people did this. So all who dwell on the earth will worship everyone whose name has not been written. And it goes on to say, well, what I mean is everyone whose name has not been written in the book of the life of the Lamb. So this beast is the political arm of the dragon, whereas the second beast is the religious arm of the dragon. The dragon and the 2 beasts are one and the same thing. Dragon and the 2 beasts are one and the same thing. But obviously, it's just like saying this. Think about this, guys. What is America? Or for that matter, take any government. What is Kenya? Now, if I was to say there are 3 arms of government, right? There's the executive, there's the judicial, and there is the parliament, right? The Congress, the representative, whatever it is called, right? Now, if I tell you that these 3 arms of government are America, or any country for that matter, would you dispute that? Now, you might say, well, that's not the whole of America. Yes, it is. Because the executive is chosen by the people to rule on behalf of the people. The judicial is appointed by the people to keep the law. And the representative arm of government is chosen by the people to represent the people. So the 3 are one. So if you want to destroy America, you need to go after the 3. Right? And the 3 are one. But the 3 are not exactly each other. The executive is not the judicial is not the representative. Make sense? So in the same way, the dragon and the 2 beasts. So the beast, the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet, they are one entity. They are one entity. But John and the prophets of the Old Testament, and indeed Jesus and the apostles, what they are doing is that they are breaking it down so that they can show you all the different operations happening within that system. It's one system. The dragon, the beast, and the false prophet are one system. They all belong to each other. So the dragon cedes his authority to the first beast, the first beast cedes his authority to the second beast. They are working together. They are serving the same purpose. So don't get too dogmatic in trying to split hairs to show this one is this one. Because sometimes I'll say, for instance, the two horns are the Pharisees and the Sadducees, which make up the Sanhedrin, which is led by the high priest. I showed that yesterday with the second beast. But now I'm showing that the dragon is a high priest who gives authority to the beast, which is, so it can become confusing. But it becomes confusing when you bring the picture too close. You need to draw further and further back so that you can see the whole picture. I'm just seeing one thing. But the one thing is operating in different ways. Amen. So let me answer certain questions here. And before I begin these questions, let me answer the question from yesterday from let me see if I'll remember how to pronounce their name correctly. I don't want to murder their name. So let me just pull it up from yesterday. Because they had asked a question yesterday, and I'm going to begin there. Norway Stowazeni. Norway Stowazeni had asked, Mr. Magua, one thing, how were Gentile nations judged in Revelation 20? As you know, the judgment before the throne in Revelation 20 is the same as the one in Matthew 25. Only Israel is judged as sheep and goats, wheat and tares. So if the books of the law are opened, how come that Gentiles were also judged by the books of the law they never had? Makes no sense how people on the peripheral areas of the Roman Empire were judged. Now, you have to understand this. The key thing is to understand the covenantal meaning of these things. Again, if you try to split hairs, then the whole symbolism works when you allow symbols to remain symbols. Okay? So, the judgment was not about individuals per se being judged. It was about a covenant system being judged. That covenant system obviously had individual people that belonged to it. So in 70 AD, God was not judging every human that was part of the Roman Empire. Rather, God was judging all the people that belonged to the old covenant arrangement. And the old covenant arrangement, starting from Adam all the way up to second coming in 70 AD, included Israelites and Gentiles. Remember, it's the system that is being judged. And the individuals are going to be swept up. It's just like if America goes to war, right? And let's say, let me just use another country because I don't want people to get angry. Let's say, let me use a real example. So, Ukraine and Russia go to war. And for a moment, Russia is winning the war. At least it seems so. Or sometimes Ukraine is winning the war. So, if I tell you Russia has lost the war or Ukraine has lost the war, who has actually lost the war? Is it the individuals in Russia who have lost the war? When America attacked Iraq in 1991 and later 2001 or 2003, whenever they went to Iraq, who actually received the brunt of the judgment of America upon Iraq? Is it every Iraqi? Obviously not, right? So you have to look at it from a big picture. So it's the system that was being judged. It's the covenant that was being judged. And the degree to which people experienced it was the degree to which they were close to it. Okay, so every Gentile in the Roman Empire did not belong to the covenant. So God was only dealing with anyone and everyone who was co-opted into the covenant one way or the other. Either they had become proselytes if they were Gentiles, or they were Israelites, and therefore they were within the covenant. They were born in the covenant, right? So therefore, Don't try to think about it as every Gentile in 70 AD was judged. No, it's the covenant that was being judged. It's the members of the covenant, the apostates of the covenant. So it means that even when he's talking about the Gentiles being judged and saying they had no law, it's not that they never had the law, because even the Egyptians and the Sidonians, they had the law throughout the Old Testament. They had the law. God had brought, the Babylonians had Daniel to bring the law to them, and so on and so forth. Jonah took the law to Nineveh, right? So that's the context in which Gentiles are being judged, if they are part of the law. They are being judged as the covenant is coming to an end, because they belong to the covenant. I hope that helps. Now the next question here, let me go back all the way to make sure I don't miss anything. I already answered G. De Leon's questions. Let me start here with Sianda. Sianda says, will this mean that when Peter saw a vision of all the beasts and the birds of the air, etc., and Jesus said to him, rise and slaughter and eat, but he refused to eat, for he said they are unholy. But the Lord said, what God has made holy, do not call unclean. Was he referring to Gentiles? Yes. Yes. So you got that, Sianda. So that passage in Acts chapter 10 is the animals in the whole tent thing that came from heaven were symbolic representations of Gentiles. And the old adage, you are what you eat. So Peter is being told, consume so that it can become you. That's why God had told the Israelites, don't consume unclean animals, because if you consume something unclean, you become unclean yourself, ceremonially, right? So, but this was supposed to just help them to understand how covenants work. So now Peter is being told, kill, eat. He's saying, ingest them, make them a part of you. And Peter is saying, no, I can't, Lord. Gentiles are unholy. Women are unclean every month. We can't allow them into this thing. Because remember, it was not just Gentiles that were kind of kept outside. Women also were kept outside, right? Because of the uncleanness of every month. So for periods of time, women just could not participate because they were unclean. But it was a representation. God was not saying that women per se are unclean or Gentiles per se are unclean. This was a representation just to show that there is a standard that God wants to establish, and therefore he chooses a group of people, particularly males, that are going to be his representatives in order to bring others in. And so Peter is now the priest in charge of the church, and now he's being told by God, I want you to go and bring them in. And he said, they are unclean, Lord. So you got that part correctly, Sianda. Ben Gaido says, now I understand the two witnesses. SP3 says, your insights on the two witnesses are very helpful. Thanks. Then he has a question here. Pastor Steve, I started watching part one. I have a question. Are the Sadducees, about the Sadducees and the Pharisees, you mentioned that they are the same. No. I didn't say they are the same. They are part of one entity, the Sanhedrin. So they are not the same because they believed differently. They believed separately, right? The Sadducees only believed in the first 5 books. They took themselves to be the Zadokites. That's why they're called Sadducees. Sadducee is a transliteration of Zadok. So they are the Zadokites. So they only did the law, first 5 books. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. That's what they believed in. They didn't believe in the other books. They didn't believe the other books were inspired. It's not that they didn't read the other books. The Pharisees, on the other hand, they believed in the whole of the Old Testament, the 39 books, being the inspired word. So the Sadducees were generally in charge of the temple system. The Pharisees were generally in charge of the synagogue system. So that's how they divided up the labor. So they are not exactly the same. If I say they are the same, I didn't mean the same as in there's no distinction between them. Okay, just to give you an example, in the book of Acts, and you can see it even with Jesus, but I think the book of Acts will give a good example of this. I believe it's Acts 23. Let me just assume it's 23. Yes, watch this. So, looking intently at the council, so Paul is before the council. Paul said, brothers, I have lived my life before God in all good conscience up to this day. And the high priest, Ananias, who is a Sadducee, commanded those who stood by him to strike him in the mouth, just like they did with Jesus. So this was very symbolic. To be struck in the mouth was to tell you, shut the heaven up. Okay. So they struck him on the mouth. Then Paul said, God is going to strike you, you whitewashed wall. Are you sitting to judge me according to the law? And yet, contrary to the law, you order me to be struck? Those who stood by said, would you revile God's high priest? So notice the question. Would you revile God's high priest? And Paul says, I did not know, brothers, that he was the high priest. Paul is being very, very strategic here. So he says, I didn't know he was a high priest. Now remember, Paul was a rabbi. And you will see this in a moment. So Paul knows who the high priest is. He knows Ananias. He's always known Ananias. He says that what Paul is saying, I know Jesus is the high priest. I didn't know this guy is still the high priest. So anyway, that's the whole thing that's happening in between the lines. So I didn't know he was the high priest, for it is written, you shall not speak evil of a ruler of your people. Now, when Paul perceived that one part were Sadducees and the other Pharisees, he cried out in the council, brothers, I'm a Pharisee, a son of Pharisees. It was with respect to the hope and the resurrection of the dead that I'm on trial. And when he said this, a dissension arose between the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And the assembly was divided. Why? For the Sadducees say there is no resurrection, nor angel, nor spirit. But the Pharisees acknowledge them all. Then a great clamor arose, and some of the scribes of the Pharisees' party stood up and contended sharply. We find nothing wrong with this man. What if a spirit or an angel spoke to him? And when the dissension became violent, the tribune, afraid that Paul would be torn to pieces, commanded the soldiers to go down and take him away from among them by force, and bring him into the barracks. So SP3 Studio, they are not the same. They are not the same. So you say scriptures seem to show three groups: Pharisees, Sadducees, scribes. So scribes really are on either side. Scribes are any person who claimed to be an editor or a keeper of the scriptures. And of course, as you can see, the Sadducees had their own scribes, and the Pharisees had their own scribes, because the Sadducees would not take the 34 books as scripture, whereas the Pharisees did. So there were scribes on both sides. So scribes is just a general statement. So there are not three groups. If you want groups, there were Pharisees, there were Sadducees, there were Essenes. So if you want religious groups, there were three groups: Essenes, and John the Baptist is believed to have been part of it, even Jesus maybe. Then there are Pharisees, there are Sadducees. But then there are the political side, there is the Zealots, the Sicarii. So hopefully that helps. Okay. So therefore, when we come to this question of, but I can see the connection that you made with the two horns being the Pharisees and scribes. So I think it's better to just call them Pharisees and Sadducees, SP3, because scribes will be on either side. But depending on who is writing, whether it's Luke, Matthew will say the Pharisees and the scribes. But you can see Luke, when he writes, he says some of the Pharisees, scribes, and so on and so forth. So in Matthew, again, Matthew 23, right? In Matthew, Matthew seems to assign the terminology scribes to the Sadducees. It's just a convention of language. I don't think he's making categories that are strict. For Matthew, usually he will call the scribes, the Sadducees, scribes, and then he will call the Pharisees, Pharisees. But really, scribes can be on either side. But there were two main groups, Pharisees, Sadducees. Amen. Well, dear friends, that will bring us to a close of our study today. Hopefully, it has been as informative and enlightening and a building up of the faith as the others have been. I do feel a little bit fatigued now after going 2 hours. I don't know why today I'm fatigued. Yet yesterday I was not fatigued after 3, but it is what it is. So I want to thank all of you for being here, for always attending these Bible studies, for always supporting me, for always sending me great messages, great questions. I really appreciate every one of you. And so until the next time, please let's continue seeking the Lord, and the Lord will continue to bless us even as he always does. God bless you. Have a wonderful afternoon.
In a world of confusion, where timelines collide and prophecy is often misunderstood, a gateway is opening, a gathering unlike any other, where the voices of the prophets echo once again. From July 8th to 11th, 2026, leaders, teachers, and seekers will converge at the Todd Hall Retreat Center for a journey through the eschatology of the prophets. This is the Gateway to Fulfillment, featuring voices you know and trust. Join Steve Magua, Tim Martin, Michael Miano, Zach Davis, Dr. Don K. Preston, and William Bell Jr., with more to be announced. For 4 unforgettable days, you'll explore the prophetic scriptures, uncover the fullness of God's redemptive plan, and gain a deeper understanding of our fulfilled hope. Seats are limited, so secure your spot now. Register today at the link in the description. Don't just watch prophecy. Step into fulfillment. If you're passionate about biblical truth, like this video and subscribe for more powerful content and conference updates. We'll see you there.